Since I started dating Elena, my relationship with her parents, Don Javier and Dona Carmen, has always been strained. I remember as if it were yesterday, the day I met Elena for the first time in my small garage in Barcelona. She had come to repair her car, a beautiful red-seat Leon that needed a new starter motor. Her radiant smile and sparkling eyes immediately captivated me. "Hello, my name is Elena," she said as I entered my workshop. "Someone recommended me your shop to repair my car." "Nice to meet you, Elena." "I'm Miguel," I replied, wiping my greasy hands on my overalls. "What's wrong with your car?" We had chatted while I examined her car and I had been impressed by her kindness and intelligence. She was studying law at the University of Barcelona and dreamed of becoming a lawyer to defend workers' rights. As a simple self-taught mechanic, I was fascinated by her ambition and determination. After repairing her car, I plucked up the courage and asked her for her phone number. To my surprise, she enthusiastically accepted. We began to see each other regularly, having coffee in the narrow streets of the Barri Gothic, walking hand in hand along the Barceloneta beach, or simply chatting for hours in my small apartment in the Gracia neighborhood. But our happiness was short-lived. As soon as Elena told her parents about me, the problems began. Don Javier, a wealthy businessman who owned a chain of luxury hotels, and Dona Carmen, a well-known socialite in Salamanca's elite circles, had made no secret of their contempt for me. I still remember the first time Elena told me her reaction. We were sitting on a bench in Park Güell, admiring the views of the city, when she told me the news, tears in her eyes. "Miguel, I don't know how to tell you this," she had begun, her voice trembling. "I told my parents about you last night." My heart had clenched. "So what did they say?" Elena took a deep breath before continuing. They weren't happy. They were not happy at all. My father said he couldn't be with a simple mechanic. And my mother, "Oh, Miguel, I'm so sorry." "What did your mother say, Elena?" I asked, dreading the answer. "She said I should be ashamed to be seen with someone like you. That you weren't our kind." "I am very sorry, Miguel. I told them I loved you, that you were a good and hardworking man, but they didn't listen to me." I felt my heart break into 1,000 pieces. Despite my sadness, I tried to stay strong for Elena. "Don't worry, my love. We will prove them wrong. Love is stronger than prejudice." But things did not improve with time. Don Javier and Dona Carmen had never hidden their contempt for me. Every time Elena mentioned my name, they would grimace as if I had just uttered an obscenity. They would flatly refuse to receive me, always claiming to be too busy or to have other commitments. The worst were the famous Sunday lunches. Every week, Elena's family would gather at her sumptuous mansion in Salamanca to enjoy an opulent meal. It was a sacred tradition, attended not only by immediate family members, but also by influential friends, important businessmen, and sometimes even local politicians. Elena used to tell me about those lunches with a mixture of emotion and sadness in her voice. "Oh, Miguel, if you could see the table. Mom always has the most beautiful dishes prepared. There is Iberian ham from Guigelo, Manchego cheese cured for months, homemade croquettes. And the main course is always spectacular. Last week it was a roast suckling pig so tender it melted in your mouth." But her enthusiasm always faded quickly when she realized I wasn't there to share those moments with her. "I wish so much that you could be here, Miguel. That you could savor all this, meet my family, my cousins, my parents' friends. I was doing my best to hide my pain." "Don't worry, Elena. I understand. It's an important family tradition. Maybe someday your parents will change their minds." But deep down I knew that day would probably never come. Don Javier and Dona Carmen were inflexible. For them, I was and always would be a simple mechanic from Barcelona, unworthy of their daughter and their world. Elena tried to defend me, of course. She told me how she argued with me almost every week. "Dad, Miguel is a good, hardworking man. He has his own workshop, he is respected in his neighborhood, why don't you give him a chance?" "My dear," Don Javier invariably replied, "you don't understand. This boy is not from our world. He could never offer you the life you're used to. And what would our friends say if they found out our daughter was dating a mechanic? But love is more important than money or social status. Dad, protested Elena. My poor naive child, Donna Carmen interjected. Love doesn't pay the bills. Love won't get you into high society. You deserve so much better than that boy, Elena. Why wouldn't you want to meet the Mendoza's son? He's a charming young man, and his family owns one of the biggest banks in Spain. These conversations broke my heart every time Elena told me about them. I could see the pain in her eyes, torn between her love for me and her desire to please her parents. I began to wonder if our relationship had a future. Maybe Don Javier and Donna Carmen were right. Maybe I would never be able to give Elena the life she deserved. In spite of everything, Elena stayed by my side. She told me that love was stronger than everything, that together we would overcome these obstacles. But I could see that the situation was making her suffer. Every Sunday, when she went to Salamanca without me, I felt that a part of her was being torn apart. As the months went by, the situation did not improve. I had the impression that Don Javier and Donna Carmen were increasingly hostile towards me, even though they did not know me. They kept trying to introduce Elena to young people from good families in the hope that she would forget about me, and I was beginning to lose hope. How were we going to build a future together if Elena's family rejected me so vehemently? How was I going to make her happy if I forced her to choose between her family and me? With each passing day, I felt the gap between our two worlds widening. Me, in my little garage in Barcelona, with my hands still stained with grease, and Elena, in the gilded salons of Salamanca, surrounded by rich and influential people. I loved her more than anything in the world, but I was beginning to wonder if that love would be enough to overcome the prejudices and social barriers that separated us. Despite all these obstacles, Elena remained determined. She kept telling me that our love was stronger than anything, that together we would overcome these difficulties. But I could see the pain in her eyes every time she had to lie to her parents about where she spent her time, every time she had to make excuses not to attend a dinner where she would be introduced to a new suitable suitor. I felt helpless in the face of this situation. No matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I saved, I knew I could never reach the level of wealth and prestige Elena's parents expected. And deep down, a little voice was telling me that maybe, just maybe, they were right. Maybe Elena deserved more than a neighborhood mechanic. One Saturday afternoon, while I was working late in my garage, a twist of fate changed the course of our story. Elena had come to visit me after her classes, as she often did. She sat on a stool next to the workbench, watched me work and told me about her day. Then his phone rang. "It's Mom," she had said, frowning. "I'd better take it." He had stepped away to take the call, but in the silence of the garage I could hear his muffled voice responding in monosyllables. When he returned, his face was pale and tense. "Are you all right, my love?" I asked, concerned. Elena had nodded, but I could tell something was wrong. "That was Mom reminding me about lunch tomorrow," she whispered. I'm going to get some air for a minute." He walked away quickly, leaving me perplexed. I continued working, but my mind was elsewhere. Something about that call had upset Elena, I was sure. A few minutes later, as I was putting away my tools, I heard Elena's voice coming from outside. She was talking on the phone, probably to a friend. I was not in the habit of listening in on private conversations, but something in the tone of her voice had alerted me. I quietly approached the half-open door. "I don't know what to do anymore, Sophia," Elena said, her voice trembling. "You should have heard my mother on the phone. She was talking about tomorrow's lunch like it was the event of the century." There was a pause during which her friend had to speak. "No, you don't understand," Elena had resumed. "He told me, and I quote, 'My dear, don't forget that tomorrow's luncheon is reserved for the elite. It's an important opportunity to meet important people.' And when I mentioned that I wished Miguel could come, he laughed." Sophia laughed. She added, "Your kind has no place here, Elena. It's time you understood that." My heart had stopped beating. "Your kind." Those words rang in my head like a death knell. I knew Elena's parents despised me, but I had never imagined they could be so cruel, so racist. "I can't take it anymore, Sophia," Elena continued, her voice cracking with sobs. "I love Miguel more than anything, but how can I be with someone my family so hatefully rejects? How can I choose between the man I love and my parents? I turned away from the door, unable to listen any longer. My mind was spinning, overwhelmed by a mixture of anger, sadness, and despair. Dona Carmen's words echoed over and over in my head, "People of your race have no place here." When Elena returned a few minutes later, I pretended not to have heard anything. But a painful decision was beginning to form inside me. That night I did not sleep a wink. Lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, repeating over and over the conversation I had overheard. I thought of Elena, of her love for me, of her loyalty despite her family's opposition. I thought about everything she was sacrificing to be with me, her relationship with her parents, her social status, maybe even her future. And then I thought of myself. A simple mechanic from Barcelona, son of Moroccan immigrants. Despite all my efforts, despite all my love for Elena, I would never be accepted by her family. I would never be considered worthy of her in the eyes of the society in which I had grown up. First thing in the morning, my decision was made. It was the hardest thing I had ever had to do, but I knew it was the only solution. I had to free Elena. I had to let her go, for her own good. I waited for Elena to wake up, my heart as heavy as lead. When she opened her eyes and smiled at me, I almost lost my nerve. But I knew I had to. "Elena," I had begun, my voice barely louder than a whisper. "We need to talk." She had straightened up, suddenly alarmed by my serious tone. "What is it, Miguel? Is something wrong?" I took a deep breath. "Elena, I think we should stop seeing each other." The surprise on her face was palpable. "What, Miguel, what are you talking about? I don't understand." "I heard you yesterday," I admitted, my eyes filling with tears. "On the phone with your mother, then with Sophia. I heard everything, Elena." Her face had gone pale. "Oh, Miguel. I'm so sorry. What my mother said was horrible. But it doesn't change anything between us, you know. It changes everything, Elena," I replied softly. "I can no longer be the cause of so much conflict in your life. I can't ask you to choose between me and your family. But I love you, Miguel," she had protested, tears running freely down her cheeks. "Love should be stronger than that, shouldn't it? Sometimes love isn't enough," she had whispered, her heart breaking a little more with each word. "You deserve better than this, Elena. You deserve someone your family will accept, someone who can give you the life you deserve." "I don't care what my family thinks," she had shouted. "I don't care about money or social status. It's you I love, Miguel. Only you." Her words pierced me like daggers, but I knew I had to stay strong. "You say that now, Elena. But what about a year from now? 5 years from now? You'll end up regretting having sacrificed everything for me. And I won't be able to take it." He tried to argue, to change my mind, but I held my ground. Every word was torture, every tear I shed broke me a little more. But I knew it was the right thing to do. At least, that's what I told myself. Finally, exhausted and crying, Elena had left. The sound of the door closing echoed like thunder in my small, suddenly empty apartment. I collapsed on the floor, overwhelmed with grief and sorrow. I felt as if I had ripped out a part of myself and thrown it away. But it was for Elena's sake, I told myself. She deserved better. She deserved someone who wouldn't force her to choose between love and her family. The next few days were a haze of grief and regret. I went to work as a mechanic, fixing cars without really paying attention. At night I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying over and over in my head our last conversation. Elena had tried to contact me several times. Calls, messages, even visits to my garage. But I stood my ground. Every time I saw his name on my phone, my heart cringed, but I didn't answer. It was better this way, I told myself. Eventually he would forget me, he would find someone else, someone his family would accept. A week had passed, then 2. My life had become a dull, insipid routine. I worked, ate, barely, slept, poorly. Nothing made sense without Elena. One night, as I was closing the garage, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Miguel." I turned around slowly, my heart racing. Elena was standing there, red-eyed, looking exhausted but determined. "Elena," I whispered, unable to say anything else. We need to talk, she had said in a firm voice. And this time, you're going to listen to me. I hesitated for a moment and then nodded. We went into the garage and I sat on a stool, waiting for her to speak. You have no right to make this decision for me, Miguel, she had begun, her voice trembling with emotion. You have no right to decide what's best for me. Elena, No, let me finish, she cut me off. I love you, Miguel. I love you more than anything in the world. And if my parents can't accept that, that's their problem, not ours. We're stronger than that. We can get through this together. Tears had begun to roll down my cheeks. But your family, Elena. I don't want to be the reason you lose your family. My family are the people who love me and accept me for who I am, she responded firmly. If my parents can't do that, then maybe they don't deserve to be called my family. Her words hit me like a punch. I had never seen Elena so determined, so sure of herself. I'm not going to give up, Miguel, she continued. I'm not going to let you give up either. Let's face this together. Tomorrow we'll go to my parents' house for lunch. Together. And we will make them understand that our love is stronger than their prejudices. I shook my head, frightened by the idea. Elena, I can't. They hate me. They will never want me at their table. Then we will force them to see beyond their prejudices, he replied with fierce determination. We will show them that love is stronger than everything. And if they can't accept it, it's their loss, not ours. I looked at her, amazed at her strength and courage. And suddenly I understood. I had been a fool. In trying to protect her, I had almost lost the most precious thing in my life. I'm sorry, Elena, I had whispered, tears running freely down my cheeks. I was stupid. I was afraid. But you are right. We are stronger together. He came up to me and gave me a hug. We're going to make it, Miguel. Together. I promise. That night, entwined in my little bed, we talked for hours. About our fears, our hopes, our future. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hope welling up inside me. Whatever the future held, we would face it together. The next morning I awoke with a mixture of apprehension and determination. Elena was still sleeping peacefully beside me, her serene face contrasting with the storm of emotions raging inside me. I got up slowly, not wanting to wake her up, and headed to the kitchen to make coffee. As the coffee pot bubbled, I remembered the previous day's conversation. Elena had been so strong, so determined. Her conviction that our love could overcome all obstacles had given me hope. But now, faced with the reality of what we were about to face, I felt fear creep back in. Elena met me in the kitchen a few minutes later, her hair disheveled and her eyes still sleepy. She smiled at me, a smile full of love and confidence that allayed some of my fears. Good morning, my love, he said, kissing me softly. Are you ready for today? I took a deep breath. I don't know if we can really be ready for this, Elena. But I'm here, with you. Until the end. He squeezed my hand between his. Together, Miguel. Don't forget. Together, we can face anything. We ate breakfast in silence, each of us deep in thought. I couldn't help but imagine the worst possible scenarios. Don Javier kicking me out of his house. Dona Carmen shouting insults. Elena crying, torn between her love for me and for her family. As we were getting ready to leave, Elena got a call. Her face darkened when she saw the name on the screen. It's Mom, he said hesitantly. You should answer it, I suggested, though part of me hoped she wouldn't. Elena took a deep breath and picked up the phone. Hello, Mom? I watched her face as I listened, trying to guess what Dona Carmen might be saying. Elena raised her eyebrows and then opened her eyes in surprise. What? But why? She asked, clearly confused. Okay, yes, I understand. We'll be there. He hung up with a puzzled look on his face. What's wrong? I asked worriedly. I'm not sure, Elena replied, shaking her head in disbelief. Mom said lunch was cancelled. Apparently they had an important call this morning and have to leave. But he still wants us to stop by the house this afternoon. I felt a mixture of relief and distrust come over me. You think it's an excuse, that they found out you wanted to bring me in and are trying to avoid confrontation? Elena shrugged, as puzzled as I was. I don't know, Miguel. My mother seemed different. Almost nervous. She's not like that. We spent the rest of the morning in a state of increasing anxiety. Each passing hour seemed like an eternity. We tried to distract ourselves by watching TV or reading, but nothing seemed to calm our frayed nerves. Finally, in the early afternoon, we got into Elena's car to start the trip to Salamanca. The hour-long drive was spent in tense silence, each of us engrossed in our own thoughts. When we pulled up in front of Elena's parents' big house, my heart was beating so fast it felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. Elena parked the car and looked at me, her eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and determination. Whatever happens in there, Miguel, remember that I love you. We're in this together. I nodded, unable to speak. We got out of the car and headed for the front door. Elena rang the doorbell and we waited, hands clasped and hearts beating in unison. The door opened and Dona Carmen appeared. Her face, normally so serene, seemed tense, almost guilty. She looked at us for a moment, her eyes fixed on our clasped hands, before she spoke. Elena, Miguel, she said, her voice strangely soft. Come in, please. We have been expecting you. Surprised by this unexpected welcome, we entered the house. Don Javier was waiting for us in the living room, as uncomfortable as his wife. But what really surprised me was the presence of a third man whom I did not know. Elena, Miguel, Don Javier said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. This is Don Alfonso. The man stood up to greet us. He was tall, elegantly dressed, with grey hair and a friendly face. He smiled warmly at us. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, he said. I've heard a lot about both of you. Elena and I looked at each other, completely bewildered. What was going on here? Please sit down, Dona Carmen said, pointing to the sofa. We remained seated, still holding hands, waiting for someone to explain this surreal situation. Don Javier took a deep breath before speaking. Elena, Miguel, we owe you an apology. To both of you. I felt Elena stiffen beside me. It was the last thing we expected. This morning, Don Javier continued, we received a call from Don Alfonso. It has opened our eyes to many things. Don Alfonso took his turn. You see, I own a large automobile company. A few months ago I bought several small garages in Barcelona, among them yours, Miguel. I felt my heart skip a beat. I knew the garage had changed hands, but I had never met the new boss. I'm used to keeping a close eye on the performance of my acquisitions, Don Alfonso continued. And your workshop, Miguel, has particularly caught my attention. Your figures are excellent, your customers are satisfied and your employees speak of you with the utmost respect. So I decided to find out a little more about you. He paused and looked me straight in the eye. What I discovered impressed me, Miguel. A young man who started as a simple mechanic and managed to run his own shop. Who works hard, who is honest, who treats his employees and customers with respect. He's exactly the kind of person I'm looking for to run my operations in Barcelona. I was stunned. I didn't know what to say. Elena squeezed my hand so hard it almost hurt, but I didn't care. This morning, Don Alfonso continued, I called Javier and Carmen to tell them about you. To tell them what kind of man you really are. And to make them understand that they were making a terrible mistake in judging you without knowing you. Don Javier took the floor, deeply ashamed. We have been blind, Miguel. We let our prejudices and our arrogance dictate our behavior. We judged you without even knowing you, without even trying to know you. We caused so much suffering to our daughter, and to you. We will never apologize enough for that. Dona Carmen had tears in her eyes. We have been so stupid, she whispered. So cruel. Elena, my child, can you ever forgive us? Elena trembled beside me. I could see the emotions that crossed her face. Anger, relief, confusion, hope. I don't know what to say, he finally managed to articulate. For months, you put us through hell. You made me doubt myself and my love for Miguel. You almost separated us. We know, Don Javier said, his voice breaking. And we will spend the rest of our lives trying to right the wrong we have done. If we're given the chance. I was still in shock, unable to really understand what was happening. Don Alfonso turned to me. Miguel, I know this is a lot to take in all at once. But I would like to make you a proposal. I need a director to oversee all my operations in Barcelona. Someone smart, hardworking, and who really understands the business. Someone like you. The job is yours if you want it. I blinked in disbelief. I don't know what to say, Don Alfonso. This is an incredible opportunity. You don't have to answer right away, he told me with a gentle smile. Take your time to think about it. Talk it over with Elena. It's an important decision. Elena finally found her voice. Dad, Mom, what you have done is unforgivable. You have hurt us so much. But the fact that you admit your mistakes, that you try to correct them, that means a lot to me. It's not going to be easy, and it's going to take time, but I'm willing to try. To give you a second chance. I shook his hand, admiring his strength and his ability to forgive. Me too, I said quietly. I'm willing to give it a try. Don Javier and Dona Carmen let out a collective sigh of relief. There was still much to be said, much to be fixed, but it was a start. When we left the house a few hours later, holding hands, I felt like I was in a dream. Everything had changed in one afternoon. The seemingly insurmountable obstacles had disappeared. The future, which had seemed so bleak just a few hours before, was now opening up before us, full of promise and possibility. Elena turned to me, her eyes bright with tears and hope. You see, my love. I told you, together we can get through anything. I smiled, my heart overflowing with love and gratitude. Yes, my life. Together we can do anything. The days following our meeting with Don Alfonso were a whirlwind of emotions and decisions. Elena and I had a lot to discuss, digest, and plan. Don Alfonso's proposal was tempting, but it also represented a major change in my professional life. One evening, sitting on the small balcony of my apartment, watching the sun set over Barcelona, I finally broached the subject with Elena. What do you think of Don Alfonso's proposal? I asked her, watching her reaction carefully. Elena took a sip of wine before answering. I think it's an amazing opportunity, Miguel. But what really matters is what you think about it. It's your career, your life. I nodded, acknowledging his understanding. It's true that it's an incredible opportunity. Running all Don Alfonso's operations in Barcelona, it's a big step forward. But at the same time, I love my workshop. I like working with my hands, getting to know each customer personally. Are you afraid of losing it if you take the job? Asked Elena quietly. Yes, I suppose I am, I admitted. And there's also the question of responsibility. It's an important job. What if I'm not up to it? Elena put her hand on mine. Miguel, listen to me. You are the hardest working and most dedicated man I know. You have made your shop one of the best in Barcelona thanks to your effort and integrity. Don Alfonso has seen it, and that's why he wants you for this job. He believes in you, and so do I. Her words warmed my heart, but did not entirely dispel my doubts. What about you, Elena? How do you feel about all this? I mean, with your parents. He sighed, staring off into the horizon. It's complicated. Part of me is still angry at them, for everything they put us through. But another part is relieved that they have finally opened their eyes. I want to give them a chance to redeem themselves, but I know it will take time to regain trust. I squeezed her hand, understanding perfectly how she felt. We'll take as long as it takes, my love. There's no hurry. We stood in silence for a moment, deep in thought. Then Elena turned to me with a small smile. You know, maybe you should talk to Don Alfonso. Explain your concerns to him, see if there's any way to tailor the job to better fit what you're looking for. I thought about his suggestion. It was a good idea. After all, Don Alfonso seemed to be an understanding man, open to dialogue. The next morning I called Don Alfonso to ask him for an appointment. He accepted immediately and proposed that we meet at a cafe near my garage. When I arrived at the cafe, Don Alfonso was already there, drinking an espresso. He greeted me with a warm smile. Miguel, I'm delighted you called. I hope you've had time to think about my proposal. I sat down across from him, a little nervously. Yes, Don Alfonso. In fact, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. He nodded, encouraging me to continue. Your offer is incredibly generous, and I am honored that you have thought of me for this position, I began, but I have some concerns that I would like to share with you. I'm listening, Miguel, she said, her full attention focused on me. I took a deep breath. You see, I really like my current job. I love the direct contact with customers, working with my hands. I'm afraid that if I take this management job, I'll lose that contact with the core of the business. Don Alfonso listened attentively, shaking his head from time to time. When I finished, he remained silent for a moment, reflecting on what I had just said. I understand your concerns, Miguel, he finally said. And I respect them. It was that passion for the job, that attention to detail and human contact that convinced me you were the man for me. He paused, taking a sip of his coffee. How would you like it if we adapted the work? Instead of being in an office overseeing operations, you could spend some of your time in the field, in the various workshops. You could train mechanics, interact with customers, make sure our quality standards are being met everywhere. I felt a surge of excitement at the idea. That could be interesting, I admitted. Don Alfonso smiled. And as for your current shop, how about turning it into our flagship shop? You could spend part of your time there, continuing to work directly with your loyal customers while training the next generation of mechanics. The more he talked, the more excited I became. It was as if Don Alfonso had read my thoughts and had found the perfect solution to my worries. It almost sounds too good to be true, I said, a bit incredulous. Don Alfonso laughed. Miguel, in business as in life, you have to know how to adapt. I don't want just an employee, I want a partner. Someone who shares my vision and my passion for this business. I believe you are that person, and I'm willing to tailor the job to make it work for both of us. We spent the next 2 hours discussing the details of the job, my responsibilities, and how to structure my time between the office and the field. The more we talked, the more excited I became about the opportunity. At the end of our meeting, Don Alfonso reached out to me. Well, Miguel, what do you say? Are you willing to take on this challenge with me? I looked at his outstretched hand and then at his kind face. I thought about everything that had happened in the last few days, how my life had changed so quickly. I thought of Elena, of her unwavering support, of the way she believed in me. With a smile, I shook Don Alfonso's hand. Yes, Don Alfonso. I am ready. Don Alfonso's smile widened. Excellent. I'm delighted to have you on board, Miguel. I am sure we are going to do great things together. As we got up to leave, Don Alfonso added, Oh, and Miguel? I would love for you and Elena to come to dinner at my house this weekend. My wife is dying to meet you and I'd like to introduce you to some important people in the company. I accepted gratefully, feeling a little dizzy at the speed at which my life was changing. When I arrived home that afternoon, I found Elena waiting for me, anxious to know how my meeting with Don Alfonso had gone. When I told her everything, her eyes lit up with pride and excitement. Oh, Miguel, she exclaimed as she hugged me. I'm so proud of you. I knew you could do it. It's all because of you, my love, I said softly. Without your support, I would never have had the courage to do all this. He kissed me tenderly. We are a team, Miguel. Always. That night, lying in our bed, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing, imagining what the future would bring. Just a few weeks ago, I wondered if Elena and I would have a future together. Now, not only was our love stronger than ever, but my career was taking a turn I had never dared to imagine. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. There would be challenges to face, obstacles to overcome. The relationship with Elena's parents would always be complicated, would require time and effort to fully heal. My new job would bring its own set of stresses and responsibilities. But for the first time in a long time, I was actually feeling optimistic. With Elena by my side, I felt capable of facing anything. We had proven that our love was stronger than prejudice, stronger than fear, stronger than anything that could stand in our way. When I finally felt myself falling asleep, a thought crossed my mind. Maybe fairy tales really did exist after all. Maybe sometimes love conquers all. And maybe our story was just the beginning of a life full of adventures and happiness. The day of the dinner at Don Alfonso's house had finally arrived. Elena and I were in front of the mirror in our room, adjusting our suits for the umpteenth time. I had opted for a navy blue suit, the only one I had, bought years ago for a friend's wedding. Elena was resplendent in a red dress that enhanced her graceful figure. "You are beautiful," I said, admiring her. She smiled at me, smoothing the collar of my shirt. "And you're looking sharp, my love, ready for the big night?" I took a deep breath. "As ready as I can be, I guess." We got into Elena's car and headed for the posh Barcelona neighborhood where Don Alfonso lived. On the way, I couldn't help thinking about how much my life had changed in such a short time. Just a few weeks ago, I would never have imagined going to a dinner party at a millionaire's house, much less as the new COO of his company. When we arrived in front of Don Alfonso's villa, I felt a knot in my stomach. The house was huge, surrounded by a lush garden. Elena squeezed my hand, noticing my nervousness. "Everything will be fine, Miguel," she reassured me. "Just be yourself. After all, that's why Don Alfonso chose you." We rang the doorbell, which opened almost immediately. Don Alfonso greeted us with a broad smile. "Miguel, Elena, I'm so glad you could come. Come in, come in." He led us into a large room where there were already several people. Don Alfonso made the introductions: his wife, Dona Beatriz, an elegant woman with a warm smile; Carlos, the company's financial director; Maria, the human resources manager; and, to my great surprise, Don Javier and Dona Carmen, Elena's parents. Elena stiffened beside me when she saw her parents. I shook her hand to reassure her, as I greeted everyone politely. Don Javier approached us, looking a little uncomfortable. "Elena, Miguel, it's good to see you," he said softly. "Dad," Elena replied, her voice neutral. "I didn't know you would be here." Don Alfonso invited us, Dona Carmen explained, approaching in turn. He thought it would be a good opportunity for all of us to spend some time together. I could feel the tension in the air, but before things got too uncomfortable, Dona Beatriz intervened. "Why don't we go to the table?" she suggested with a reassuring smile. "Dinner is ready." We all made our way to the dining room, where a magnificently set table awaited us. I sat between Elena and Carlos, with Don Alfonso facing me. The dinner started out a little tense, but as the conversation became livelier, I felt more and more at ease. Don Alfonso asked me about my ideas for the company, and I enthusiastically shared some of the suggestions I had developed since our last meeting. I thought we could establish a continuing education program for all of our mechanics, I explained. With the rapid evolution of automotive technology, it's crucial that our employees stay current. Don Alfonso nodded approvingly. "That's an excellent idea, Miguel. Carlos, what do you think? Could we incorporate it into our budget for next year?" Carlos seemed to think about it for a moment. "It would require some initial investment, but in the long run it could greatly improve our efficiency and the quality of our services. I think it's feasible." I felt a surge of pride that my ideas were being taken seriously. Elena gave me an encouraging smile. The conversation drifted to other topics. I learned that Maria had grown up in the same neighborhood as me, in Barcelona, and we shared some childhood memories. Carlos turned out to be a soccer fan like me, and we had a lively conversation about Barca's chances for next season. Meanwhile, I noticed Elena talking quietly to her parents across the table. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their conversation seemed intense and emotional. Towards the end of the meal, Don Alfonso asked for everyone's attention by lightly tapping his glass with his spoon. "Dear friends," he began, "I would like to propose a toast to Miguel, our new Chief Operating Officer. I am convinced that with his experience, passion, and integrity, he will help us take this company to new heights." Everyone raised their glasses, congratulating me warmly. My cheeks blushed from the praise. It was then that Don Javier stood up, to everyone's surprise. He looked nervous, but determined. "If I may," he said, "I'd like to say a few words." He turned to Elena and me, taking a deep breath before continuing. "Miguel, Elena, I would like to apologize to both of you. Our behavior toward you was unforgivable. We let our prejudices and arrogance blind us, and we almost lost our daughter because of it. Dona Carmen stood up with tears in her eyes. We have been so stupid, she added. We have failed to see how extraordinary you are, Miguel. We have not respected the love that you and Elena share. I was stunned. I didn't expect a public apology from her. Elena squeezed my hand so hard it almost hurt, but I didn't care. Don Javier continued, we know we have a long way to go to regain your trust. But if you give us the opportunity, we would love to try to be part of your lives. This time the right way. There was a moment of tense silence. All eyes were on Elena and me, waiting for our reaction. I looked at Elena, letting her respond. She took a deep breath, tears in her eyes. Dad, Mom, what you've put us through has hurt us deeply. It's not going to go away overnight. But the fact that you recognize your mistakes, that you want to change, that means a lot to us. She looked at me, seeking my approval. I nodded, encouraging her to continue. We're willing to try, she continued, to give you a second chance. But it will take time, and you will have to prove with your actions that you have really changed. Don Javier and Dona Carmen nodded, visibly relieved. That's all we asked for, Don Javier said. A chance to show you that we can be the parents and in-laws you deserve. Don Alfonso raised his glass once again. Here's to family, love and new opportunities, he said with a warm smile. We all toasted and the atmosphere in the room relaxed considerably. The rest of the evening passed in a much more relaxed and cheerful atmosphere. Later, as Elena and I were saying goodbye, Don Alfonso took me aside for a moment. Miguel, he said, I wanted to tell you how impressed I am with your behavior tonight. You handled a difficult situation with grace and maturity. These are exactly the kind of qualities I look for in a leader. His words touched me deeply. Thank you, Don Alfonso, for everything. He gave me a friendly pat on the shoulder. I thank you, Miguel. I am convinced that we are going to do great things together. On the way home, Elena and I were silent for a long time, digesting everything that had happened. Finally, Elena spoke up. Can you believe it, Miguel? A few weeks ago we thought it was all over between us. And now we have a future ahead of us. A bright future. I smiled, squeezing her hand. It's all thanks to you, my love. You never stopped believing in us, even when all seemed lost. She shook her head. No, it's because of us. Together we proved that love can triumph over anything. When I got home that night, I realized how much our lives had changed. The obstacles that had seemed insurmountable had disappeared. The future, which seemed so bleak just a few weeks ago, was now opening up before us, full of promise and possibility. Of course, I knew that not everything had been resolved. It would take time to rebuild a healthy relationship with Elena's parents. My new job would bring its own challenges and responsibilities. But, for the first time in a long time, I felt really sure of myself. As we lay in bed that night, Elena snuggled against me. I realized that our story was much more than a love story. It was a story of perseverance, courage, and forgiveness. A story that proved that sometimes life can be even more beautiful than our wildest dreams. And as I drifted off to sleep, one last thought crossed my mind. Our journey had only just begun. And I couldn't wait to see where it would take us.